As we've discussed on this channel, specifically recently, the dangers of summoning Lilith are vast. Many of you have commented that the entity is not only powerful, but also unpredictable and can do lots of damage. I do have an instance that comes to the forefront of my mind, one that always reminds me that while Lilith is sinister, she's also patient, striking like a spider in the darkness for the fly on her web. Susanna was a young girl, just out of high school, barely getting her feet wet in the world, tasting what this life has to offer her. In the early stages of her first years at university, she participated in the usual things, parties, drinking, events at her sorority. She met a man eventually. We'll call him Eric. Her and Eric hit it off with a fiery passion that young love can bring, a turbulent relationship that eventually ended with a messy, heartbroken Susanna. A couple of years is a long time in university time, and that was the time frame that exhausted all that the relationship had to offer. In a few months after the breakup, while trying to recover the remainder of her heart, Susanna was told that Eric was seeing someone else, someone who he had seemed to be madly in love with almost immediately. Susanna was filled with anger and rage at this news that she was just told, and decided at that moment that she was going to do everything in her power to make him suffer. Susanna's roommate, we'll call her Hannah, at the time was not your typical sorority girl. She dabbled in things, dark things. She was said to cause fear in those around her, but Susanna found her fascinating. Late one night, after crying for hours, in desperation, Susanna walked to Hannah's room. Throwing herself on Hannah's bedroom floor, she pleaded with her for anything that Hannah could do to make Eric pay for everything that he did to her. She wanted him to hurt as much as she did. Hannah sat back and thought. She told Susanna that she'll need a few days, but that she was sure they could do something about Eric. With this, Susanna was comforted enough to stop crying and get sleep that night, knowing that Eric was soon to be as unhappy as she was, and that he and his new girlfriend were going to be no more. This elated Susanna. After 3 weeks, Susanna became annoyed, thinking that Hannah had forgotten about her, only to have Hannah show up to her room and ask her to come outside. Together, they walked to a wooden area and sat together in the darkness. There, in the dark, together they called upon Lilith to comfort Susanna with the intent of revenge that she put into the offerings. The next day, Susanna did feel better. She was almost scared at the thought that what they did the night before in the woods was real, but she was enjoying feeling free enough to take part in the day and to not be sad. As time went on, Susanna graduated university and started seeing someone she really liked and enjoyed their company. And after some time, they became engaged and soon married a few years later. Susanna's life was absolutely amazing, with the love of her life by her side, in their brand new house with the white picket fence. The dream. She really was living the dream. The cherry on top was that Susanna was soon to become pregnant with her first child. The thought of having a family of her own overwhelmed her with so much joy. Some months later, to the end of her pregnancy, Susanna was contacted by a friend from university on social media to catch up. Her old friend had told Susanna that her ex, Eric, was going through a rough patch with his then wife, the woman who he had met in college after he broke up with Susanna. Apparently, Eric's wife had been quite sick for some time, stricken by a massive unknown ailment that doctors could not diagnose. The frequent hospital visits and stays has caused them to lose everything that they had in bills, and they can no longer afford to live in their house. The stress of being sick and losing everything caused Eric's wife to end her life. Susanna hung up the phone silently and sat in her nursery. She really thought about what her and Hannah had done that night in the woods. When the amazing things did start to happen to her, she attributed it more to luck than silly witchcraft they did that night, but upon hearing what she was just told, Susanna's blood ran cold. Eric did suffer, it appears, greatly. She got what she wanted in the end, but Lilith still needed to be repaid for her services. Like I said, Lilith is patient and always collects what she wants. Susanna looked down to her blood-soaked legs. Pools of blood puddled at her feet, only for her to realize at that moment that Lilith came to collect her fortune, her prize, an offering. Susanna's firstborn child.